You know the feeling. I know you know this feeling. Don't pretend you don't. Don't pretend you don't. It's when you run into that one person who just gets right under your skin, the one who, no matter what they do or say, you'd rather jump into a cactus patch than be around them. It's the person that when you're in their presence, you feel white hot rage coursing through your veins, and you're annoyed at like a DEF CON level 1 kind of level. You know what I'm saying? And the funny thing is that often you're the only one that feels that way. You're the only one that feels that sort of feeling towards the person. It's as if the other people are sort of are like these fancy Gordon Ramsay endorsed Teflon pans, and you're the clunky, unseasoned cast iron pan found in grandma's attic that everything sticks to. So why is that? Well, mon ami, we're going to get into this today. And I'm going to start by telling you the tale of who that person was for me and what it did to me and why it took me years, and yes, years, to figure out why this person affected me so much. My name is Paul Silva. The podcast is Seared, Stories from the Stove. And in this episode, I'll share a little bit more about why certain people just rub us the wrong way and ways that you can look at things differently for your peace of mind and for the sake of expanding your own heart. And to turn that annoyance down to a simmer or maybe even off. It's very doable. I'll guarantee you. Well, maybe not guarantee, but we'll get there. Anyway, settle into a cozy chair, grab your Ovaltine, whatever, and let's kick it off. Thanks for being here. And I don't mean in terms of you like literally being here, because if you were, you'd notice that I smell a bit. Not in the BO kind of way, but a couple days ago, our two dogs decided that they would find out what it's like to interact with a skunk. Yes, a skunk. I let the dogs out. Then I heard like a commotion, which didn't sound good. And lo and behold, the two dogs have been sprayed. The one dog, the oldest, she just sauntered in like nothing happened. The other one was like shaking his head back and forth. I was like, oh no, he got it right in the face. Oh, poor guy. He was like, he got into the house, which at the time I thought was a good idea because I didn't want the skunk and the dogs to interact any further. But no, bad idea in the end because my whole house reeks. Every crevice and molecule of this place has been impregnated with the absolute vile, repugnant smell of skunk. So these last couple days, 4 days now, I think, I can't tell you how many loads of laundry I've done. Every open window, every fan on, every incense, every scented candle, baking soda everywhere. Just trying to absorb as much. Of course, the dogs are fine. You know, a little shaken up, but they had a nice scrubbing at the pros, and they're probably the cleanest smelling things in the house. So anyway, I'm just all that to say that it's a good thing that this isn't like a smell-o-vision broadcast because you wouldn't stick around. But since we're not, I'm glad that you're here. So let's talk about a stink of another kind. And that's like the stink guy that I used to give a certain person that worked under me for a while. Let's call him Barney. So Barney was a cook, and you know, one of the things, there was red flags galore, but one of the first things, just meeting him, he started to chirp about, you know, the other chefs there and this and that, and just testing me. And I knew he was testing me where I was, like, you know, would I side with him? Would I side with management? And I was management. So like, dude, give it a rest. But this was a guy that, he was like a rabble-rouser, right? Like he was very much about talking the talk and not walking the walk. And I used to joke with him, I was like, do you get paid by the word? Because you're talking a lot and your hands aren't moving. So, very confrontational, always wanted to be right, you know, just like smart. He was a smart kid. Very smart. Like sharp as a tack, as they say. But I found he was just using it in the wrong way. Like this was not what he should have been doing. He needed to be a lawyer or something. But this guy, Barney, would just get under my skin. Just his voice alone would just, it took some time for me to get to that point, but I just couldn't shake just how much I was shaken being around this guy. It's just, I look at the schedule. Where is he? Like it started to consume me a little bit. And I remember one day, and this had been going on, and I'm polling my colleagues. I'm like, does he do the same to you? They're like, yeah, he's kind of annoying, but they were able to move through it and past it. I'm like, how do you do it? I just want to the white hot rage I talked about earlier. And I remember I was doing everything in my power to get away from him, like not be in the same room, et cetera, et cetera. And there was a phase where I was with him like every single night, and there was another guy that was even worse, I think. But I could handle. The guy who was worse, quote unquote, I could take him. I could deal with him. But Barney, I couldn't. There was something that just kept needling me. And I remember, and I'm not proud, but I remember when I finally, when I heard that he had resigned, and I literally jumped out of my seat and I danced. I don't dance. This made me dance. So what was that? Right? Like, and here's the funny thing. My struggle didn't end there. Like long after he left, whenever his name was brought up, because he was still friends with a lot of cooks there, I had the same visceral reactions. There was still that something that was just jamming me in the ribs. And it left me all prickly and frustrated. And I just needed to know what it was that was affecting me still. Now, at the time, I was, working, doing a lot of inner work and stuff. And I knew about shadow. So, and I'm not going to get into the whole shadow thing. But if you don't know shadow, Carl Jung talked about it like the shadow self. And the shadow is essentially the things that we turn our back on and refuse to own up to. It's the part of ourselves that we don't like. It's the parts that we have disowned and sort of subconsciously denied as being in existence. It's kind of like where your suppressed feelings and thoughts and beliefs and desires all live. Like I said, we can go on about this for quite a long time. That's not the point of this episode. But what I can say is that shadow can show up in many ways, like judgment and criticism and resentment. And especially when we get triggered. Triggers are a huge clue as to what's in your shadow self. It's your little tickled trunk in the darkness. But here's the thing. Shadow, like the conscious, wants to integrate. And as much as you hide it and think you've got it hidden and it's swept under the rug, it's not, it's still there. And it's going to show itself in different ways. So for an example, it could be, let's say your friend likes to treat herself with gifts and maybe little trips and getaways, or maybe nice meals at nice restaurants. And you may look down at her and call her spoiled, or what a waste of money to do all that kind of stuff. Now, your shadow side may hold the desire that you would love to spoil yourself, but you were taught that doing so was frivolous or wasteful, or that you were made to feel bad for thinking about treating yourself. So you swept that part of you under the rug. But it comes up. It's coming up through your friend. Or let's say if you see someone as lazy and trying to work the system, always had an angle, and you're constantly criticizing them, but you may or may not know that perhaps deep down you have demonstrated the same things in your life. And that's a part of you that you have subconsciously put away, and it's hiding in your shadow. So I share all this because I knew about all this. So my struggle was in like, okay. If Barney represents a part of me that I dislike, what the hell could it be? I mean, this guy's annoying. He's mouthy. He picks fights. He's ignorant, etc. All the things that I'm not, at least not to me consciously. So maybe this whole shadow thing is wrong because I don't see anything of him that I see in myself, if that makes sense. I mean, there are other reasons why people can get to us. One is that you're just wired differently than the other person. Like you have a totally different vibe, totally different personalities. That makes sense. That's common. But at the same time, I thought, well, I get along really well with people who are very different from me, like politically or spiritually, mentally. Like I'm fine with 99.9% of the people. Let's not go that far. Maybe. So again, it came down to like, why this guy? And like, I don't know. You know, sometimes I wouldn't know. But in this case, I didn't see that clashing of personalities was necessarily the issue. It could have been a part, but I felt there was something deeper. You know, another reason why people can get under our skin is something that's called affective presence. And it refers to how we make other people feel just by being around them, regardless of your own emotions or intentions. It's like this overall lasting effect we leave on others. It's like, you know, someone that walks into the room and immediately the emotional temperature changes. Like you can walk into a room minding your own business with no agenda. You're just walk in, no intention of doing anything. And almost immediately people's emotional states shift. You know, and I'm not talking about like when, you know, the hard ass boss walks in and everyone like scrambles, jumps into pretending to be working or whatever, working harder. It's not that. That's more fear-based. I'm talking about that person who enters a room and just lights up the place, like that kind of person. Or alternatively, dims the joint down. Like those people that, you know, they step in and just the place feels heavy. They're not doing anything intent. They're just strolling in. So that's another reason. Lastly, another reason why someone can bother us is that they remind us of someone else. It's what psychologists call transference. That is, you take the traits and characteristics of a person that you know, someone that you may not like, and you transfer them to someone else. So maybe the barista reminds you of the sister you don't talk to. And so you treat the barista in the same way. You know, I learned this when I was in recovery and working with like a mentor, like sponsor. And he was sharing this part. And he said, Paul, you know, there's some people that no matter what you do, what you say, they're just not going to like you. And I was a people pleaser, like recovering people pleaser. Thank you. And he said, you know, it could be that you just remind them of someone and there's nothing you can do to change that. And it's always stuck with me. And that's one reason. Now, as a fun fact, the sort of the opposite of that is something that's called the halo effect, where you assume something positive about someone, and it's usually physical, and you treat them accordingly. So like the example, you know, you see a student in a classroom and they're prim and proper and they're very polite. You will assume that they're a good student. They may not be. For me, I've been struck with the halo effect when I was recruiting. Like I would see, and this happened like maybe two or three times, where I would be interviewing someone and they reminded me of me when I was starting out. And so then I jumped to the preposterous conclusion that they wanted what I wanted, acted and thought like me. And I took them on later on to find out that they were nothing like what I thought they were. That was the halo effect. This is the flip. So as I was pondering all this, I was like, okay, that's not it. It just doesn't feel like it was that. You didn't remind me of anyone. So I want to share this passage from a book. This is, if you're listening, you won't see this, obviously. This is The Way to Love by Anthony DeMello. I love this book. Tiny little book, and it's got all these little meditations, but they're like little lessons. And this is one called Bring in the Poor. And I read this years ago, and it still sticks with me. I want to share with you. So he talks about perhaps bringing in this person that you don't like. He talks about a poor person or unhoused. And Now take a look at yourself reacting negatively to this person and ask yourself the following question. Am I in charge of this situation, or is the situation in charge of me? That's the first revelation. He talks about this person giving 3 revelations. With it comes the second revelation. The way to be in charge of this situation is to be in charge of yourself, which you are not. I wasn't, aside. How does one achieve this mastery? All you have to do is understand that there are people in the world who, if they were in your place, would not be negatively affected by this person. They would be in charge of the situation, above it, not subject to it as you are. Therefore, your negative feelings are caused not by this person, as you mistakenly think, but by your programming. Then he talks about the third major revelation and he goes on concerning human nature. Pick this up. You can read the rest of it. Again, just getting into what I talked about earlier about examining yourself. It's me, right? So I struggled with this for 2 years. 2 years. I was trying to figure out why this guy grated on my nerves like sharp cheddar on a cheese rasp. And I finally figured it out. One day, I finally figured it out. The reason I got charged up with this Barney was that he reminded me when I was back in my drinking days, even when I was, early sobriety or whatever, when I was manipulative, when I was always wanting to be right, when I wanted to blame everyone for my problems, because that's what Barney did. No personal responsibility. And that was me. It was an older version of me, but it was still me. It's like that old me was trapped in his body, in Barney's body. And I didn't like it at all. He reminded me of me back when I was not at my best. Now, sure, Barney was still annoying for other reasons. That I could have handled. But the reality is, just like Anthony DeMello mentioned, other people didn't have the reaction I did with him. So when I realized this, it was like, the heavens opened up. I finally got it. And guess what? After that, never thought of him again. Never thought of him again. The only time I mention him or think of him is when I'm sharing this story. I've shared this in other ways. But that's the only time I think of him. And I can't tell you the relief I had. And what that taught me is that I still needed to do a bit of healing around certain things, to step into more self-forgiveness for that old version of me, and to hold more compassion for myself. See, this is why when you can hold more compassion for yourself, you can hold it for others more. Because when I see and give space and love and accept and shift what maybe I was in the past, I can see it in other people and hold more compassion for them, more empathy. And so that was a big lesson, and I'm grateful for it. I just wish it wouldn't take so long. But I was able to get there. So now that, I Columboed it. Remember Columbo? Now we've solved that. Like, now what? What about you? What about you? What are some ways that you can see things differently when you run up against someone you just don't like or can't get along with or don't want to get along with? We're going to cover that. So hold tight. Grab a, vegan croissant sandwich. Is that possible? Croissant vegan? I don't know. Anyway, we'll chat. All right, welcome back. I don't know about you, but on the break, I like to check my social media. And right now, as of this recording, Meta is down worldwide. So I'm sure it's going to come back. It always does. But there's always that panic, of course. It's like, is it my phone and you're restarting? Is it my modem? Is it my router? What? And I guess it's just, hopefully it comes back. And the only reason I mention that is because this doesn't change what you and I have got here. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're still here. We're still connected. We don't need Meta. So just we're good. We're good. So let's get back to this because it's time to get serious. ish. You know me. All right, so let's imagine this. You have a dislike for Tony in the engineering department, or maybe it's Mabel. Mabel down at the fruit market, sour as the cherries that she sells. Or whoever your Newman is to your Jerry Seinfeld. Here's some ways that have helped me in the past deal with people that I may dislike. And I share these. Maybe they will help smooth things out for you. So, one, and this is super obvious. I know. Know that you are not supposed to like everyone. And them not you. I say this as a people pleaser recovering, and also someone who still, in many ways, wants people to like me. We all do, at a core. We want to be included and liked. So this idea that I'm not supposed to like everyone, sometimes it feels like, what's wrong with me? It's a character flaw. Just because you're not pals with everyone. You're not meant to. It's just human nature not to be pals with everyone. If you can accept that at a core level, you're going to be good. Trust me. And it took me some time to figure that. I'm still in some ways absorbing that because I just want everyone to be good and happy, but that's not my job. You know what I'm saying? Two, let it go. When you get caught up in your emotions, you're letting them run you, just like in the book was saying. Be neutral with the person as much as you can. You know, there's something called gray rocking, and it's kind of like an extreme version of being neutral. It's a technique used for people who have to deal with like narcissists. I'm not saying who you dislike is a narcissist. I'm not saying that. But one of the things they do is they don't give anything to them, like emotionally. They kind of shut down in a bit, and they'll just respond with, okay, all right. Just really keep them at arm's length. Now, that's an extreme tactic, but if you find that you may need that, you can step into it. The idea is just to be neutral. That's all it is. And letting go of actively disliking someone. Just let them be them and you be you. And of course, it's easy for me to say here, standing behind the microphone, but I've been there. And if you can just sit in that and work at that, you can do it. And when you do that, things become so much easier. I promise you. 3, and this is important too, don't let dislike slide into disrespect. Just because you don't like someone doesn't mean you get to treat them like trash. You don't. As much as your ego and your self-righteous anger and all that stuff, all that delicious stuff, thick enough to drizzle on waffles, practice civility. Step into integrity and treat everyone with as much grace and poise as you can. Yes, even the uncle who says stupid shit at the dinner table. Don't sink down to other people's levels. And I'm going to share a little bit later, very soon actually, an example of that. 4, see people as a work in progress, because we all are. You are, I am, everyone is. Perhaps the person you dislike is misunderstood or doing things in a way you wouldn't. Perhaps they're struggling behind the scenes like most of us do. Don't make assumptions, but see them as the flawed human being that we all are. We're all flawed. And you know what? You might be doing something right now that you're just doing your thing. And people are perceiving it differently. Imagine how that would feel knowing that people are perceiving a certain thing you do or how you say is being perceived in a different way. Like you'd be like, oh my gosh. We do the same. 5, resolve your own issues. That's the big one, right? Just like I had to figure out for myself, you may want to invest in learning what it is about you that drives you to disliking someone. What is the trigger? What do those triggers mean? How do they show up? And again, not everything has to be a big thing. Sometimes it's just like, yeah, we don't vibe, and that's fine. That's cool. But if you feel, this is where you just got to check in with yourself. If you feel there's something more to it, then I would highly suggest you dive into that a little bit more. Because it's not about just getting over this disliking this person. It will, but it's going to be for your ultimate growth. And that's really what's at stake here. 6, sidestep which as needed. So what I mean by that is you don't have to go to war. You don't have to go to you don't have to go to every fight that you're invited to or you feel like you're being invited to. Again, it's one of those things where that person that you dislike, they just sneeze a certain way, they breathe a certain way, and you're like, oh, bro, that's about me. Oh, did you see how they disrespected me? No. You're inviting yourself to a fight that you perceived as being invitation is given your way. Another thing you do is limit your time with certain people as much as you can, especially if it's someone that's close, like in close proximity all the time, or that you work with a lot. Limit your time as much as you can. And absolutely, pick your battles as necessary, but only coming from a place of owning your emotions, being in control of them. You can absolutely stand for what you believe in, but don't take everything as an attack. 7, be like the Stoics. Do no harm, but take no shit. That is, no one can cause you harm without your consent. Stand up for yourself when needed, again, but don't intentionally go out to do harm. Again, practice civility. Or else you're just losing sight of yourself and you are becoming that which you do not like. Again. Now, having said all this, again, if someone is treading on you, your boundaries, intentionally causing you harm in any way, or even something that was illegal, unethical, immoral, whatever it is, then yes, take action. Take appropriate measures. Still show up, though, with integrity. Come at it from emotions in control and your spirit unblemished. And it'll shift how you show up. Because in the end, it's not about them. It's not about Mabel. It's not about Tony. It's about you and how you respond. There are going to be folks that are struggling in plain sight. And there are asshats, absolutely. And many will be self-proclaimed asshats. But it's about how you are with you first and foremost. Barney was just being Barney. And how I responded was me being me. Now, which one of those do you think I can control? It's me, of course. And because it always comes down to us. And I want to give you an example. I said earlier, about wanting ego and self-righteousness to step in. Here's another story about Barney, but it didn't involve me. It involved a colleague of mine who was also Barney's boss. It was on my day off, and Barney was just being Barney. Barney was being Barney. He was probably said something sassy, out of line. And this guy, my colleague, took him out of the kitchen, politely brought him down to the office and closed the door and absolutely ripped him a new one. Like 10 minutes, a barrage of just... Brr. And I only know this because I didn't hear it from my colleague. I heard it from everyone else who heard him through the door. People not even in our department heard him. Now, I believe, I did ask my colleague about it. He goes, oh yeah, he didn't say a word. I'm like, I'm sure he didn't. But here's the thing. I'm sure it felt good. And, some people say maybe Barney deserved it. I don't know. But in the end, people were not talking about what Barney did. People were talking about the dressing down that my colleague gave him. So it wasn't even about Barney anymore. It was about the leader and how he responded. And so I say this as a cautionary tale because there's so many times you're going to want to unleash and unload. But again, that's your emotions now taking over. And your ego and your pride. And people are going to remember that more than actually what happened. So you become now the star you become the lead story when you really don't want to be. I want to leave this with Anthony DeMello, again, the Way to Love. This is kind of near the end of that little meditation or lesson, where before you used to be controlled, and he's talking about these persons who had power to create negative emotions in you, and you went out of your way to avoid them. You now have the gift of freedom to avoid no one, to go anywhere. When you see this, you will notice how to the feeling of compassion in your heart has been added the feeling of gratitude to this person who is your benefactor. You actually feel a desire to seek out the company of those growth-producing people. The way that someone who has learned to swim seeks water. Where before you used to feel the oppression and tyranny of negative feelings, you can actually feel an ever-expanding compassion and the freedom of the skies. Isn't that wonderful? Again, it comes down to you and your growth and allowing yourself to overcome what it is you feel others are projecting onto you. So I want you to sit with that. Promise me that. Yeah. So with that, homies, please remember to subscribe, comment, leave a review, or share this with anyone who you know may be struggling with someone that they dislike and just don't know how to handle it. And if you want to go deeper with this kind of work in a more private way to create a new and better you so that you can take on the world, then please check out my website and see the different ways that I can be of service. The link is in the show notes. So I want to thank you again for being here. Kitchen's closed. Now scram.